Thank you guys so much for having me here. It's funny thinking about bringing home all these big ideas that you've been talking about to practical realities. The theme of the panel that we're going to have right after this is basically that even in the context of bringing these things home and making them real, things are changing so fast that what it meant to bring them home and make it real 3 months ago doesn't apply today. We have hit another major inflection point. And so what I wanted to do is basically just do 15 charts in 15 minutes that give you kind of a sense of, or my sense of where AI is, set us up for this conversation. And so let's rip into it. You heard who I am, I don't need to go through that. The big theme always with AI is acceleration. And I think that the important thing to note is that AI isn't just moving fast, it continuously moves faster, right? So ChatGPT, when it came out, was the fastest technology ever to 100 million users. It took 5 weeks. Previous to that, TikTok had taken 8 months. That was extremely fast. It grew from there, took a couple of years to get to 400 million users, and then rocketed up to 800 million users. Now, there was a burst there because of the Studio Ghibli thing and image generation coming out. But even just today, we got reports that they have now 700 million weekly active users. And across every metric, users, subscribers, revenue, we have hit another inflection point in just the last couple of months. Now, maybe an even better indication of that comes from a recent Google earnings report where they talked about the amount of tokens that they were serving monthly. And it went from 480 trillion in May to 980 trillion this past month. So 104% increase in 2 months. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons why that is. But basically, the short answer is that the more that people use AI, the more that they discover that the best uses for AI are using more AI. So it's just compounding. The acceleration is compounding certain challenges that we face in the market. The compute shortage is only getting worse. You see here 4,300% growth in demand for compute over just the last year. The projections of sort of our capacity versus availability, we're looking at 10 gigawatt shortages over the next couple of years. And yet, even as that happens, the cost is coming down. So you have this straight up to the line graph of usage, and yet costs are coming down. But even with this, it's still creating challenges. Anthropic just had to throttle, for the first time, developers on their premium tier to much chagrin. And it's just, that is the state that we're in. Costs are coming down faster than anyone would have thought, but the demand is increasing so fast that it's still creating challenges in the short term. Now, importantly, the shift is not just in consumer AI, although obviously that's a lot of what you hear about. You hear about ChatGPT numbers going up and things like that. There's also been a major shift in enterprise consumption. I'm sure many of you live inside of this. But it seems, if you look at the numbers, that the introduction of reasoning models and the use cases that they opened up were a major pivot point. So this chart comes from Ramp, who is a financial technology company. And this is an estimate of the percentage of businesses in the US that have an AI subscription. And you see this kind of sort of slow, steady growth, slow being relatively speaking, from 5% at the end of 2022 to 25% at the end of 2024. And then again, just a straight line up to 42% over the course of the first quarter. And this is a quarter old at this point, and I'm sure it's continued to change. Now, the big thing that reasoning models opened up are, of course, agents. Let's talk about agents. This comes from the most recent KPMG Pulse survey, which many of you, I'm sure, have seen. But the really startling number here to me, this is something that I've watched closely, is that 11 to 33% number. So you had, between the Q1 and the Q2 survey, the percentage of organizations that said that they had moved beyond an agent pilot into a full agent deployment triple in a single quarter. And you have to think that that number is just going to continue to increase. I know that the survey, I think, is just out right now. Part of this is because performance is increasing. So this is an interesting way to look at agent performance. It's not perfect. There's plenty of critiques to be had with this particular approach. But basically, this organization, Meter, what they did was they asked how long an agent could complete a task for successfully at 50% success. Easy to quibble at the methodology, but the point is it's a consistent methodology. And what they found is over the last few years, agent capability and AI capability more broadly has been increasing about every 7 months. And what's more, it looks like that basically over the last 12 months or so, that's now up to about 70 days. So we're seeing doubling of capability increases every 70 days. Now, this doesn't even include tool usage, which is obviously a totally transformative force when it comes to what agents can do as well. This is just raw capability. And so as capability increases, the number of use cases that get unlocked increases as well, and that sort of, I think, is part of why we're seeing such an increase in people using it. When it comes to what people are using AI for, at this point, it's very clear that the first really huge breakout use case is agentic coding. This, I think, explains a huge part of that massive increase in token consumption that we saw in that Google chart from May to July, where there's just been an explosion in how many people are using agentic coding tools, what they're using for, how robustly they're using them. And importantly, it's not just software engineers who are using them. One of the things that makes agentic coding so fascinating is that it's one of the first examples we have where AI capabilities are democratizing a capacity that wasn't available before, right? In fact, one of the reports that you see pretty frequently right now is software engineering teams still having a little bit of trouble or trickiness figuring out exactly how to integrate these tools, right? They're incredibly powerful, but they create their own set of challenges, right? You get these big, massive sets of code that are sometimes unwieldy, and you kind of are constrained by whatever the agent or AI can do to fix itself. But when it comes to non-coders using these tools to prototype new features or to design internal tooling for themselves, that's something that's brand new. It's totally unlocked and is unlocking productivity in other parts of the organization. Now, if you look at actual sort of surveys of what people are doing with AI, you see this agentic coding thing come up over and over and over again. So this is actually interesting. This is a study of not enterprises broadly, but specifically the companies that are building AI. So it's 300 companies who are building AI products themselves. And you can see agentic coding is sort of by far and away the top use case. And then almost everything else has some amount of usage. It's very clear that we're still, broadly speaking, in an experimental stage where everyone is trying it for everything across the entire organization. And I think that if there's one thing to really take away, it's that we have skipped right on over the agents being the cool, exciting next thing stage into agents are here, they're being used. You don't see anyone getting up on stage and talking about their cool prototype agent. You have all of the big companies talking about agent orchestration platforms and agent management. Like we jumped, a full kind of skip into reality. And so that's kind of where we find ourselves. That's, of course, creating its own set of challenges. And this will be a lot of what we talk about in the next panel. One of the interesting questions is, what are agents actually being built for? What are our sort of the bounds of our ambition with these things? At the bottom there, you have, again, from the recent Pulse survey, a question that was asked around how much people are thinking about agents as strictly kind of an efficiency, a productivity-enhancing technology, versus actually thinking about it as a new opportunity technology, right? A way to grow revenue. And I think it's actually extremely positive to see that already about half of organizations are thinking about these things both. They're trying to think about both of those kind of dimensions to it. I even think it's positive, even though sort of efficiency beats opportunity by about a 2-to-1 margin with the rest of them, there was no one basically in that survey that answered that they were only using it for efficiency and productivity. So there's very clearly a sense, I think, among people deploying these agents that their opportunity set is not constrained to just people doing their existing work a little faster, a little better. This other study that I have here on the chart, the green one, asked a similar, if kind of different question about basically for people whose organizations were deploying AI, how were they thinking about it, right? So the deploy idea was they're just giving us assistant tools and letting us figure it out. The reshape idea was we're actually fundamentally rethinking workflows and sort of the positions that we have and how we do our work. And then invent was we're thinking about totally new use cases, things that weren't possible before, new product lines. Again, this is incredibly early, right? We just saw that it was only with the Q4 24 release of reasoning models that agents really came online. And you already have 50% of these organizations, self-reported of course, but 50% saying that they're actively thinking through total kind of redesign of core positions, and almost a quarter of them thinking that they're already thinking about how to kind of design new aspects of their business. There are challenges, though. One of the things that's really interesting now is that agents have come online so fast is that we're kind of racing to catch up with human employees and how human and digital employees are going to interact. So both of these charts come from a recent Stanford survey where they basically asked workers what they want out of agents, what they want out of AI. And so you can see on the sort of the right-hand side that my read on this chart is that people are still very much just wrapping their heads around what they want their relationship to be. I think the fact that the sort of default answer is they want an equal partnership with digital employees says we neither want to be replaced, nor do we just want to hand over all these responsibilities, nor do we want to ignore this, right? But it's sort of very nascent. The other chart I think is even more interesting. So this is a matrix of basically automation capabilities on one axis, automation demand from workers on the other axis. So the green zone is basically areas where automation capabilities are high and employees actually want that automation. And again, remember, this is employees, not managers. This is employees. So that's sort of like this green light zone. The red light zone is areas where capabilities are high, but people don't really want those things automated. And you can see each of those dots represents a company or a startup or a product that's building in that area. And one of the interesting things that followed this study is someone went and mapped Y Combinator startups onto it, and they found a lot of companies building in that red zone, which makes sense because a lot of Y Combinator companies are people who are right out of college or didn't even finish college. Maybe they haven't like gone and interacted with those people, so they're not exactly sure where to build for. The R&D opportunity zone is areas where people are interested in automation, but the capabilities aren't there yet. And obviously the low priority zone is capabilities aren't there and people don't want it. But I think, again, this is the type of thing that we now have to figure out is where do we actually want to build these tools? There's also a new set of skills that matter, right? The skills that were highly valued yesterday are going to be different tomorrow. And on top of that, there's also this new skill set, or at least a reapplied skill set, when it comes to agent management. One of my big gripes with the state of AI upskilling and capabilities sort of programs right now is that they're very stuck in a pre-agent paradigm and not really thinking about agent management and agent organization. And I think that's a real challenge. Now, another key challenge, and this is something I think we'll talk about a little bit, is the gap between how leadership and how employees think about AI inside their organizations. So I think many of you saw May from Writer a couple days ago. Writer did a survey in December. They asked 800 executives, 800 employees the same set of questions. And you can see this pretty chasmic gap between their perceptions of AI strategy. So think the company has been successful in adopting AI over the past 12 months. 3/4 of leaders thought that they had, only 45% of employees. So obviously, I think that there is more work to be done, not just in communicating AI strategy, but actively getting people bought in and maybe even getting them to sort of have agency in what that strategy looks like. There are also, I think, some very core data technical challenges that we still face as agents come online. The Economist found that only 22% of organizations thought that their existing sort of data and technical architectures were up to the challenges. And this was even a little pre-agentic. So you got to think that it's even higher than that. So tons of work to be done here. So where does this all leave us? The short answer, and we're going to get into this more now, I think, in this next panel, is that the change is bigger and happening even faster than we think. Even in a world that's moving as quickly as it is, we've hit yet another inflection point over just the last couple of months, which has rocketed us again to a faster pace. And that creates a real challenge for everyone who's thinking about how to actually implement these things, how to manage, or how to do change management at the speed that it requires. And just to leave you with sort of one indicator of again, just how fast things are changing. This comes from ChatGPT's recent release of ChatGPT Agent, which is their first general purpose agent. And they had an internal benchmark where they basically compared ChatGPT agent outputs to human equivalent work for a set of knowledge work tasks. And they found, in their estimation at least, self-reporting, so grain of salt, that the agent performed as well or better on 50% of tasks. We are less than a year since reasoning models opened agents up. We are weeks into ChatGPT Agent having its first real release, and they already think that 50% of complex, economically viable knowledge work can be done as well or better by ChatGPT. So the magnitude of the challenge is very high, but that's why they have you guys.